Is $100,000 enough to retire on in New Zealand? What about $250K or even $1 million? I paid tens of thousands of dollars to get one of the top spreadsheet nerds in the world to find out what your retirement looks like based on what you've got in the bank. And some of the numbers are going to shock you. So in this episode, we're going to run the real numbers from 100K all the way up to $2 million in retirement savings. And once you see what you can spend at each level, by the end, you'll know exactly how much you need to retire comfortably in New Zealand and which tier you're on track for. Now, Andrew, you talk to investors all day, every day. Do people actually know how much they need to retire?
No way. No. In fact, I'll give you a good example. Some friends of the show, and he's probably listening, they're very successful property investors and business owners. And I met with them a couple of weeks ago to work through kind of a retirement plan for them, like a more sophisticated one that Ed and I have been trialing. And these guys could spend twice as much of what they want to spend starting now, but they still are working because they are worried about not having enough.
Okay, but they've got oodles of money. They probably could retire, but they don't know if they can or they didn't before they started looking at some numbers. Now, this is a big problem in New Zealand where people either work too long or they spend too much and run out of money before they die. And so to try and solve that problem, I hired one of the top spreadsheet creators in the world to create me a model to understand what can you actually spend. Now, this cost us tens of thousands of dollars to develop. So before you ask, we're not sending it out to everyone, but we are going to run the numbers as if we've got two 65-year-olds both getting New Zealand super and look at, what could they spend at different levels if they had 100K, 250K, 500K, $1 million, or even $2 million, just so you can get a sense of what retirement might look like. Now, when we say, how much do you need to retire? I hate this saying, Andrew, but it really is like, how long is a donkey's tail? I just made that up.
It's quite good.
But it could be long, it could be short. Was it docked? And so, what do you mean?
I don't know that they can be that long, can they?
Can they? Producer Dave, who knows? Are we going with this or are we going to go back and
let's go with that.
I've read one. So there's no set amount that if you want to retire, Andrew Nicol, you have to spend $2,000 a week and nothing less. It's kind of like, well, how much do you want to spend? But what we do know from Massey University's research is that a choices lifestyle is about $1,700 a week to spend if you're living in one of the main centres as a couple. $1,700 to $1,800 a week. That's what a comfortable lifestyle kind of looks like. So let's go through each level and say, well, what if this couple who's getting super had 100K, 250K, and so on, and look at what it would look like. And we're actually going to go through the spreadsheet. So let's say they've got 100K.
Now, if you've got 100K, so you built that up through KiwiSaver and maybe a bit of savings, if you're getting the pension based on our model, 65 to 90, he can't live past 90, so you need to take up heavy drinking and smoking at that stage at 89. Based on our model, you can take out $106 a week from your savings, plus the super gives you $932 a week, I think it is roughly for a couple. So you're about $800 a week short of what's considered comfortable for a couple. Now, it might sound like a lot of money, but if you think about, you've got to pay your rates, you've got to pay your insurance, you've got to pay your power, your groceries, you might only have $100 to $150 a week left over, and that's your entire fund budget. And you might be thinking to yourself right now, well, I only spend $100 a week on myself at the moment. That might be true, and that might continue to be the same, but retirement, you got a lot more time on your hands, and so you might have more time to go out. You might have more time to go on holiday. You might want to do these kind of things. And I think the biggest thing is if you want to help out family, you want to take your grandkids away, you want to take your kids away or the kids you like, or if you have an emergency like hot water cylinder bursts or the car needs 4 new tires, all of a sudden that $100 a week, it's not going to last.
But if you've got 100 grand in your account at 65, if you set it up the right way and invest in the right things, you might be able to pull out just over $100 a week. And for all of these scenarios, I am going to assume that this couple have got their own home, they've paid off the mortgage, and that they plan to spend all their money by the time they are 90. Because, what happens if they don't have their own home?
Yeah, that becomes a bit of a problem because your single biggest variable cost in the whole equation is going to be your accommodation. So if you rent a 2-bedroom unit in Auckland, that's probably going to be about $30,000 a year going out in rent. Now, you don't have rates, you don't have insurance or house insurance, you don't have maintenance, but it's still a big chunk of your money. So 30 grand a year, that's going to be 70% of your super just out to that. So that doesn't leave a lot for your lifestyle.
Well, that's where life gets really tough. You either have to lean on your friends and family or try and get some subsidised rent from the council or a charity or the government. But let's say we go up to the next tier and you've got $250,000. Now, if you set it up the right way, where we gradually take a small amount out of it per week, you're going to be able to spend about $1,100. Again, with most of that coming from the New Zealand super. Now, $1,100 a week for the couple sounds pretty good, but we're still only 2/3 of the way to that choices lifestyle. Now, let's say that we're retiring with our $250K today. What does that get you if you can spend $1,100 a week?
You're probably getting to go out for dinner maybe once a fortnight, but it's going to be a relatively cheap dinner out. You're not going to be going out to, where do you like? You like going to those fancy Auckland degustation
No,
places?
I can't. No, because then you roll out of it. People are going to think that I'm bougie, Andrew, where I'm not. I like to cook at home these days, which sometimes is just as expensive as going out to your local
100%.
bistro.
But yeah, I mean, again, if you're comfortable with this, if that's the kind of thing that makes you happy, going down to the pub for dinner, all good. But again, we're just talking about the limitations of your spending. You're probably going to be able to do some trips, but it's going to be more like a camping trip or a long weekend away, maybe a couple of times a year, maybe once a year. You'll have a small emergency buffer. So if the hot water cylinder goes, in this instance, it's okay. You're probably going to not end up going without food for a month, or if you need to do something with the car, you're probably okay. You're less worried about money, but you're still going to have to be really, really cautious with how you spend.
Well, the other thing that you've just got to keep in mind is that if we look at the research about what retirees actually spend, we typically see retirement spending broken up into 3 chunks. From like 65 to roughly 75, you're in your go-go years, right? You're going to be traveling, potentially going overseas because you no longer have a boss apart from your significant other. So you're going on your trips, you're living it up. And in fact, I was just in Queenstown over the holiday. And we went to this wonderful whiskey distillery, Cardrona Distillery, which is a great place in Cardrona, halfway between Wanaka and Queenstown. And I met this great British couple. Now, they're 62 and 61. They've just both retired, and they are in their go-go years. They're traveling around the world. They're living it up because finally they don't have to go to work all the time. So their health is still good. They're living it up. Then from 75 to 85, you go from the go-go years more to I call it the slow-go years, right? Where you're going to have a simpler lifestyle because your body don't work so good anymore, right? You know, you're not going to, it's harder to go traveling internationally on these big flights. Oh, yeah.
Your knees wouldn't handle those long-haul flights.
I mean, my knees doesn't handle it anyway, where we are. But then from 85 plus, look, it's basically your no-go years, right?
You're going to be staring out of a window telling everyone in the nursing home you had a podcast once upon a time at that stage.
Well, it's because you're basically sedentary, right? You can't move as much. Now, that's not to say that anybody who's 85 or older is just lying in a nursing home bed, right?
You're not listening to the podcast. You're okay. You're safe.
No, but I've seen some 90-year-olds who are still with it, who are still hippity-hoppity.
Who?
Martha from Wanganui. I can't remember if her name was Martha. But, you know, back when I was like, this is like 15 years ago plus, when I was back in my opera singing days that, I remember doing a show at the Royal Wanganui Opera House. And I was brought in for Wanganui Opera. And there was this lovely old lady who probably was about 85 who was still on stage going for it. And I thought, good on her.
She was probably 63 at that stage. You know how everyone's old until you become old.
She didn't realise she was meant to be in her no-go years.
She's basically you now.
And so when it comes to these 3 different stages of lifestyle, we haven't factored that in today because they're quite personal, but this is something you should definitely work with your financial advisor. And I know that some interesting things have come up when you've been working with people thinking about how their retirement actually looks.
Yeah, I think one thing to remember is that the maths isn't quite as simple as going, right, I want to spend on average, let's say 100 grand a year. I want to spend 125 for the first half and then 75 for the next half. Because if you erode more of your savings in the first half, you earn less interest in the second half. So your money runs out a lot faster. So you do have to model this out correctly.
And then we come to the third tier. So let's say we retire at 65, got $500,000 in our account. What can we do with that?
So if you've got $500,000, you might be able to spend $1,350 a week. Now, in this instance, you're about 80% of the way to the Choices lifestyle. You're almost there, but not quite. So at this level, you are going to start to genuinely feel a bit more free financially. Not completely there, but you are going to feel a bit.
Well, what does it change?
So I think at this point, you can probably eat out regularly, maybe once a week. You've probably got a decent car, so maybe less maintenance because you've been able to spend a bit more for that newer model. Again, not probably brand new. You're not buying a Lexus or anything like that, but you are buying something quite reliable. You're probably having a decent holiday every now and then. So maybe a batch for a week in the summer and maybe a ski trip in the winter, maybe an overseas holiday.
A ski trip, bloody hell, Andrew. Ski trips are very expensive.
Are they? Oh, okay.
Do you know, honestly, if you want to go skiing, it'll cost you $500 for the day.
Okay.
By the time you buy your pass
maybe we're
and hire
back to
your
the
gear.
batch and the beach, but you're doing some things. You're probably doing an overseas trip every couple of years, but it's going to be something like Fiji or the Gold Coast or the Cook Islands. Again, nothing wrong with those things, but again, you're not going to be doing a Europe trip if that's what you're into. As far as hobbies go, probably got club memberships. You can play bridge. You've got some money towards health insurance, and I think that's probably a big thing. Or if not health insurance, your own, paying for things privately. I think
you're probably not getting to that stage at 500K though. If you think about it, once you get older, health insurance can easily cost 15 grand per person. In fact, I was talking to somebody who was 67 years old and they're paying around that $10,000 mark per person for health insurance.
Okay.
And if you're not spending money on health insurance, you're effectively self-insuring, right? So if something goes wrong, you're either going through the public system, which might take some time, or you've got to shell out for it yourself.
Okay, so we might leave out that kind of option. You might be reliant still on the government-provided health system, which is excellent, by the way, but again, there's going to be big wait times.
So we've got 2 tiers left. What if you've got $1 million?
So
what does that get you?
So $1 million, you're now going to be living in the well-off lifestyle. That's $1,880 a week by the time you're taking your super and topping that up with your savings. You're genuinely living what's considered a comfortable retirement by New Zealand standards. Now, in terms of what that looks like from a day-to-day perspective, you're probably looking at regular holidays overseas, and this might include Europe or Asia, not just the Pacific Islands. You've probably got quality health insurance at this tier. You are going to have a lot more freedom. You're not going to be spending money willy-nilly, but you're certainly going to have a lot more options, and particularly in those earlier years of retirement.
Well, in that case, you've still got a buffer when things go wrong. If something goes wrong, you can kind of absorb it. And at this point, you are on that Choices lifestyle. Like when Massey University runs the numbers to look at what is a Choices lifestyle, they estimate, I think, just over $1 million is what you'd need for that. Of course, our number is a bit different because we're calculating them in a bit more sophisticated way. If you are looking for a financial advisor who can run these types of numbers for you, that's exactly what our team at Opus Partners do. These are the financial advisors that Andrew trains and who get all the spreadsheets and tools that I create. And this is to help you see what your future could look like. And if you want to book a free session with them, you just go to our website, opuspartners.co.nz. You click on the big orange button, choose your financial advisor, choose a time that suits you, then you get your wealth plan. And then finally, we get to tier number 5, which is $2 million in the bank. What does that get you?
So at that level, you are going beyond comfortable. You're probably considered wealthy at that stage, wealthy in retirement. Now, your spending can be almost $3,000 a week for 2 people with no mortgage. So what does that look like in terms of practical sense? Well, you're probably having multiple overseas trips a year, and you can probably splurge to business class occasionally as well. You're probably being able to upgrade your car every few years to, again, cut down on the maintenance costs, and make sure you always have a safe vehicle. You've probably got premium health insurance, or you're able to support your own health needs if you're self-insuring. And I think probably one of the biggest things that a lot of my clients want to do, and you can do at this level, is you can actually be generous when helping family or friends as well. So if taking your kids away on holiday every now and then, spending time with your grandkids, taking them overseas, or helping them out towards tuition and stuff like that, you can do it at that kind of level.
I think on top of that, you could afford care later on in life, right? Going to the Ryman Healthcare in the Somerset and going into hospital level care without it completely destroying your estate. With $2 million, you can take a really different approach.
And just one thing that I often get asked, so I just want to point out, that's $2 million or $1 million or $100,000 over and above your personal assets. So don't factor in your own home to these equations, because you always need a house to live in.
Yeah, we're talking about how much money have you got in the bank or ready to invest in shares, bonds, or equity within your investment properties that's actually able to be invested and drawn down on. Now, some of these numbers, like $2 million, are really large numbers, right? But that's why people are listening to the show, investing in property, because they want to move towards those higher numbers. But I also want to give you the comfort that if you're retiring with $100K in the bank as a couple in say one of the bigger centres, life might not look like it does in a magazine, but you can still have a quality life.
We have a very good social welfare system here in New Zealand, which provides a superannuation. It is a good start. It's just if you want those extra luxuries, you have to do more.
So now you know what each tier of retirement actually looks like, from scraping by to business class flights every few years. But knowing the number is one thing. Actually building your wealth to get there, that's something else. Which is why I break down exactly how to use one house to buy 5 more in this video. Click the video on screen and watch it now.